Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, coming to you from the Rockford IceHawk studio here in Chicago, Illinois, this is Bill Swerski's Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So grab yourself an ice cold one and a bowl of sausage, sit down, park your keister, and listen to This is Bill Swerski's Sports Talk Chicago.
I'm starting 9 dickas.
I'm starting 9 dickas.
All right. Sounds like we need to make a side bet.
Starts with a C, ends with an O, and in the middle is a K.
Ditka's hair follicles cure malaria.
All right, gentlemen, the answer was the Bears.
Coach Ditka's hair could single-handedly cure our dependence on foreign oil.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears. He's a merciful Dick.
The Bears.
The Bears. The Bulls.
Go, Cubs, go! Go, Cubs, go!
The Bulls. The Bulls. All right.
Hey, please, this is a family show, my friend. No cursing.
Yeah, that kind of language it belongs in the gutter, the speakeasy, and Coach Ditka's press conference.
You know,
That's right, folks. It's another edition of Bill Swerski's Sports Talk Chicago, and this is going to be the season is right around the corner Chicago Bears episode. I'm flying solo today. My partner in crime, Gary, is on vacation. He's in Seattle seeing the White Sox play the Mariners. So this episode, we're going to be talking almost exclusively Bears. We're going to break down the Cubs a little bit. The big news, Javi Baez coming up. If you are looking for White Sox talk, Blackhawks talk, Bulls talk, not this episode. Promise more next week. So let's jump right into the Bears had their very first preseason game against the Philadelphia Eagles. It was a nice win. It was on Friday night. Let's go through the good, the bad, and the ugly. As I said before, I went to the Bears Family Fest, which was basically like their first practice for the season at Soldier Field. Went to that last weekend, and then actually I'm just getting back from training camp today. I'm recording this on Sunday. Just got back from training camp today, which the news is that Martellus Bennett has been had his suspension ended, and he was in practice today. Looked really good. So in between that time, we had the Bears' first game against the Eagles, and last year the Eagles absolutely decimated the Bears. Embarrassed them, made them look terrible. It was just a complete embarrassment. So I thought this was a nice test for the first game of the preseason. Before I say any of this, preseason is preseason. I've been watching the Bears long enough that I know that preseason doesn't matter for anything per se. And also it is one game, so I'm not going to either hit high highs or low lows off of a preseason game, especially when it's only been one game. But there are things that I look for, and there's things that are nice to see. In the beginning of the game, the defense is what I really wanted to see, how they looked against that really quick Eagles offense, where they run a lot of plays, move the ball really quickly, and there was a little bit of a rough start trying to get the defensive packages in. So you saw a lot of people out of position, guys changing, running off the field and running onto the field at the very last second, and it was a lot of difficulty trying to get the plays in and get everyone organized. But after the first two series, it seemed to really settle down, and the Bears got into rhythm, which was nice to see. One of the first things I noted was all of last season that Nick Foles, the quarterback of the Eagles, threw 2 interceptions. He was 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He threw 2 interceptions in the first quarter of the game. So that's really nice to see. Seeing the Bears have takeaways, and against a guy who didn't throw interceptions last year. So it's not like he's a sloppy, accident-prone player or mistake-prone player. So let's look at some of the good. Jay Cutler looked really comfortable. Sure, he wasn't in very long, but while he was in there, he looked really comfortable in the pocket, comfortable running the offense, comfortable, knowing where the guys were going to be and even put a lot of finesse on a lot of passes instead of just zinging everything in there like it's a missile. Had some nice touch on the ball, and that was really nice to see. I was really impressed with Jay Cutler. Granted, it is one game and it's a preseason game, but this was what I was kind of looking for going into the season. When you have a lot of turnover on offense with your team and your coordinators, it's difficult to get any sort of rhythm. And when I talked to Martellus Bennett several shows ago, I asked him about that, and he's like, "Oh, we have smart players. Everybody learned the system." And sure, everyone learns the system, and you know the plays, but your comfort level with the plays and your comfort level with your teammates knowing the plays, especially at the quarterback position. So when Jay Cutler is really comfortable in that style of offense, you have to, just like with Peyton Manning, you have to know where your receivers are going to be. You have to know where your linemen are going to be. You have to know where all of your teammates are going to be at any given time. So when you have a new offense, you don't quite trust where everyone's going to be. And that's why you saw Jay Cutler throwing a lot to Brandon Marshall, because he was really comfortable with Brandon Marshall. He knew where Brandon Marshall was going to be, not necessarily everybody else. Now that he's got a lot more experience under his belt with an Alshon Jeffrey, with a Martellus Bennett, with a Matt Forte, and with this offense, and then he knows those guys know where they're going to be, and you see some of the other guys, like Zach Miller, they know where they're going to be, and suddenly you have a team full of guys you know where they're going to be, and it's going to make that really potent offense from last year even better. And that's what I wanted to see. So Jay Cutler looked comfortable. It was also nice to see on the defensive side of the ball getting back to gang tackling. Under the Lovey system is you always ran to the ball. When somebody was getting tackled, you always ran there and helped make the tackle, and they've gotten back into that this year. They didn't do much of that last year, but this year they're back to the gang tackling. Guy holding him up, everybody comes, and when you see on this TV screen, you see the receiver with the ball, and you see one of the opposing players, and you see 6-7 guys from the defense all gang tackling him. That's nice to see. Willie Young, the new defensive end they got from Detroit, only had 3 sacks or whatever last year, but I believe he led the league in pressures on quarterback. That was, so what that's saying is, he's interrupting plays, just not quite getting there. And sometimes interruption is almost as good as a sack. And Willie Young, when he was in, was getting to the quarterback. He was really pushing that pocket and abusing those offensive tackles. So it was nice to see Willie Young get some pressure on, because the Bears had no pressure from the defensive line last year. Peppers was terrible. McClellan was terrible. The injury-plagued defensive tackles were terrible. And this year, with a healthy rotation and some new talent and defensive tackle and a whole new defensive end crew, they're already starting to look pretty good. I'm just trying to check out my notes. I watched the game on Friday a couple of times, once full through, just live, and then I went back and I watched it, stopping and rewinding to take a look at some plays, because I really wanted to see, not just where the ball carrier was, but what other people were doing. So my notes, Cutler's 40-yard pass to Alshon Jeffrey was really nice. It did get called back because of a penalty, but that was a really nice pass, and there was some nice finesse to it. His touchdown to Miller was great. Spreading the ball out to different receivers was good. So that was my notes about Cutler. Zach Miller, I just wrote on my notes, Zach Miller, ! I really, as I said before, I'm going to totally fess up. I was not a believer in the backup tight ends for the Bears. I had Martellus Bennett, and then there was a bunch of guys that weren't very good, including Dante Rosario. And everybody looked really good. It was nice to see. It was, you don't want to see Martellus Bennett suspended, but it was nice for him to not be in the game and give more opportunity for some of the other guys to really shine. Zach Miller was phenomenal at catching the ball. All I can say is that I wish they would have had a side-by-side, picture-in-picture of Zach Miller when he was running those plays and catching the ball, and look on Mark Trestman's face, because he was probably like a kid on Christmas going, I have another weapon. I have another weapon. Because now think about it. Last year they couldn't run 2 tight end sets because they only had 1 tight end that could catch the ball. Now with Miller, the way he was running, you put him in a 2 tight end set with Martellus Bennett. You put out Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall, and then you swing Matt Forte out. Who do you cover? You suddenly have a really formidable offense that you can't cover everybody. So that was nice to see. Dante Rosario looked really good. He had some nice catches and took some solid hits and got right back up. He had that one play where he was running for the first down and he dove, and that was really good field awareness. It was so nice to see him just being able to recognize where on the field and where the down and distance, where he needed to go, and he stretched out to get it, even though it was a preseason game. Mulligan, he had some really nice blocks, and on the best run of the game out of anybody was that Forte run, and Mulligan had a great block, and they called the penalty on it, which I don't know if that's the way the league is going, or if that was just, the referees being off a little bit as well. But I didn't see a hold on that, and I just thought it was a good block. So I'm going to give him a plus on that play because it looked really nice, and he had a great block. So if he's going to play like that, I'm very impressed. Another thing about the defense is Shady McCoy. He was phenomenal last year, and the Bears on stretch plays stretched him out and kept him from bouncing back in the inside and really taking advantage of an open field, and stretched him out until help could come and keep it to a minimal gain. And they did that a couple times, and that was nice to see because last year there was a lot of contains that were broken and led to big plays. Everyone's taking their assignment really to heart, and they were stretching Shady McCoy out, not going in for a big play and missing or completely blowing their gap, but they were stretching him out, and then help came down and kept it to 1-2 yard gains instead of 6, 7, 8 plus yard gains. That was really nice to see. Ryan Mundy with the interception. Ryan Mundy has looked very consistent. I've been really impressed with Ryan Mundy, and coming off of a bad Giants team, I didn't know what to expect from Mundy, but he's been really, really nice pickup. I think he's been the best playing safety out of everybody, and we'll get to the safety play in a little bit. Jeremiah Ratliff looked really good. It was nice to see him playing healthy with, the rest and then the training camp and being in shape. Because when he came in last year after his injury, he really wasn't that good of shape because he'd been out for so long. And whatever you got from him was, minimal, just because he would have a great play and then be out of breath. Now to see him in training camp where he's got some conditioning and he's had some time to work out and get back into shape, looking really good. Matt Forte had a great block. He was on the right side of, I believe it was still Cutler at the time. There was a blitz coming from the top side of the left end, the blind side of Jay Cutler. He came across him and took the guy's legs out, prolonging the play, allowed for Cutler A to not get hit and B to be able to get the ball off. That was nice. Michael Ola looked pretty good for stepping in. Sure, he had some rust on him, and he's a young kid. He stepped in with the starters and did a nice job because he was filling in for Eben Britton, who's out, Jordan Mills is out, and also for Kyle Long, who wasn't playing either. Those were the goods and the win. Also, Trevor Scott, the defensive end kid, didn't have a lot of great moves, didn't have a great bull rush or spin move or swim move or anything like that, but the kid has hustle and made some good plays. And as far as I'm concerned, he's, as far as probably that last defensive end position, he's probably got to be up there in favorites. The safety play has been pretty good. I didn't know what to expect because they didn't go out and sign a big name, and we really had no idea what to expect from the guys we do have. So, I mean, as far as the safety crop, we've got Craig Stelt still on the roster, who's a holdover from last year, and we know what he have, and he's not that good. New guy, Ryan Mundy, Danny McCray, Marcus Trice, MD Jennings, Adrian Wilson, who, if we had Adrian Wilson from a couple of years ago, we knew what we have, but he's coming off of a serious injury, so we're not sure where he's at health-wise, and he's in the tail end of his career. A rookie, Brock Vereen, and then Chris Conte, who was statistically the second worst safety in the NFL last year, only behind Major Wright, who was the other Bear safety. So historically bad safety play. So really didn't know what to expect. And Stelz and Conte haven't played at all because of injuries. And so we've been getting a hefty dose of Ryan Mundy, Danny McCray, Adrian Wilson, and Brock Vereen, and I have liked them all. They've all been solid. They've had some hiccups here and there, but the safety play so far, in as far as the practices go, the first game, the play of the safeties has been much, much better than it was last year. And Adrian Wilson is looking much more like the Pro Bowl Adrian Wilson than I thought he would. And I'm not saying he's playing at a Pro Bowl level, but I'm saying he is much closer to that than he is the other end of the spectrum that I thought he would. So if you put Pro Bowl on one side and complete injury bust on the other, he is much closer to Pro Bowl than he is the other end. And that's good to see because, you know, they've really been pairing him a lot with Brock Vereen, who's physically gifted and talented and has all the tools to be a good safety. He's got some mental issues that he needs to kind of work on, where mental lapses. You know, there was a couple ones where he got beat by, you know, a pump fake, and he had to make up for it, and a couple other ones where he bit on fakes, and I think that's why they've been pairing him a lot with Adrian Wilson, because Adrian Wilson's pretty much seen everything you can throw at somebody. He's seen it all. So I think they've been pairing him a lot to communicate. But Ryan Mundy has been the best safety for the Bears, and Adrian Wilson probably second best. And if that ends up being the safety combination, I'm not going to complain. They've looked good so far, but we do have 3 more preseason games and several more practices, so anything could happen. We'll see. But Brock Vereen is nipping at everyone's heels. The guy, I see why they're giving him so many reps, because he's really talented. He's going to be a starter sooner rather than later. Just sort of have to see when he gets more experience under his belt and how much he wants it, because if he goes in the film room and watches a lot of film and really busts his butt in practice, that kid is going to be a starter. He's going to beat out everybody. So the safety play, you know, I read a lot of experts, quote unquote experts, and I keep referring back to quote unquote because they're just guys that have gotten jobs doing it. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily smarter than everybody else. They just are reasonably well articulated guys that have gotten careers and worked hard to get where they are. So quote unquote experts, they all said that they expect Craig Stelz and or Chris Conte to make the roster, and I don't see it. I really don't. Unless they keep Craig Stelz to be a special teams guy, I don't see them making it. You know, coming off of the injuries, missing out on the time, how bad Chris Conte played last year. I mean, I like Chris Conte. I thought he was a serviceable guy for the Bears, but when the Bears' defensive line wasn't able to get pressure, it really exposed Chris Conte, and I don't know if he can win back the fans. I don't think he has enough talent to win them back. And I think him making the roster is going to send a message to fans that mediocrity is acceptable. So I think even if he ends up being a guy that's, you know, borderline, right on par with another guy who for a last roster spot, I think that he loses out just because he represents part of the old regime, and B, Bears fans have a lot of bad taste in their mouth as far as Craig Stelz. I mean, I expect Ryan Mundy definitely on the roster. These are barring injuries. Adrian Wilson definitely. Brock Vereen definitely. Marcus Trice has had some moments, and Danny McCray is definitely going to make it. So there's 4 locks, and if they decide to keep 5 safeties, then it's either going to keep 4 or 5 safeties. So that might be it. If they do keep one more, you know, I don't know if Chris Conte beats out MD Jennings, because they've really liked Danny McCray. So we'll see. And that's about it as far as the good that I saw. There was some bad. Start with the bad is the officiating, and that doesn't just say, oh, this guy made a lot of calls against the Bears. It had nothing to do with who I was rooting for. There was just, they had a new official on, it was first year in the NFL. There was some, poor calls there. And then there was just a lot of weird calls. There was a lot of ticky-tack calls as far as, the defensive backs holding and pass interference. And it was really ticky-tack. And I'm all for, not letting guys like Richard Sherman beat the crap out of wide receivers and get away with it, because that's terrible. And Richard Sherman, if they make these rules stick, he's going to be in serious trouble, because he can't play without doing some of those things. And if they're going to start calling penalties on all those, he's going to have to change his style. But as far as the game, they made a lot of ticky-tack calls, and I was not, and most of them were in the favor of the Bears, but it was not what I wanted to see. I think they should be allowed to play a little bit, especially since the Bears' number 1 and number 2 receivers are big guys that can really play physical as well. I think there's that gives them some nice room to play. What else? So the officiating there was some weird holdings that they called that I didn't think were holding, against both sides. So the officiating as a whole needs to improve, and I think it will by the season start. It's already much better than the replacements of last year, or was it the year before, but they still need to get up. They need to do better to get up to snuff. The run blocking was pretty atrocious for the Bears. Carryover problem from last year. Forte had a lot of yards rushing, but it was, as a whole, the run blocking wasn't very good for the Bears, and that's really carried over. I know some of it was accentuated by it's the start of the season, and run blocking takes continuity and reps and getting everybody to where they need to be, as opposed to pass blocking is more of a one-on-one exercise. Run blocking is more of a team exercise, and you need to have the continuity among your offensive linemen to do really well. That's why the better run blocking teams are offensive lines that have been together for a number of years. So they really have gelled into one unit. And the Bears offensive line, if it all goes to what I'm reading and what I'm seeing, is going to be probably the same as it was last year. But Kyle Long had the viral infection, so that kept him out for a while, and now he's got a little bit of a sore ankle, so he's been sidelined. And Jordan Mills he had some surgery in January, and then he tweaked it again in practice. So today he was in a walking boot. I'm hearing that it's really nothing to worry about, but they're gonna hold him out and let him get some rest on it. And then the other three, Slauson, he is what he is. He's probably the best lineman the Bears have, and that includes Pro Bowler Kyle Long. So far, Roberto Garza hasn't looked that great, and that's a little bit scary because he's an older guy. You never know what you're going to expect with the older guys. And I was a little worried last year because he was a little long in the tooth. I thought maybe they would go after another center because he was a free agent, and they did. They went after De La Puente, but he also got hurt on Friday. And as an update, I don't know if anybody's heard, it was a sprain. He sprained his knee, so there's going to be there's no structural damage, and it's not going to be a long-term injury. I believe they said he will be back before the season starts and be at 100%. So that's good, because Boggs did not impress me at all. We'll get to him in a second. But Jermon Bushrod, he's a veteran. He'll be fine. Slauson is really good. He'll be fine. Garza, hopefully Garza can play well. And then once you get the starting right side of the line, I think the offensive line run blocking will get better. But as it stands right now, it was a little rough. And then once you got into the second string, third string, and fourth string, it got worse and worse, and it was just really bad. But as a whole, they need to get better. It's something they need to improve. Eric Weems didn't have a good game on Friday. I keep hearing how he's in the lead for the number 3 wide receiver position. He's in the lead for kick returner and punt returner, and he did not have a good game. And I know what he can do. He's a really good special teamer. I know what he can do, and I'm not that worried. He just had a pretty rough game to start. He had a fair catch that I think he should have done a return on, He got drilled in the back really hard, and he got taken to the ground. He dropped another pass, and then after he dropped it, he got demolished by Corey Williams from the Eagles. He had another bad return. So he just didn't have a good all-around game. I think he's a veteran. He's a special teams guy. I think he'll be fine. Special teams as a whole did not look so good. Had a kick block, had a fumble, gave up a touchdown on a kickoff. But then they had some good moments of return coverage. So, it's a shaking the rust off of on the special teams as well. They've got to get out there and in practice today they really did a lot with cycling in new teams for the punt and kickoff returns. So they weren't even wasting time because they only let me take a short break here quick and step back for a second. So when they have if you've never been to the Bears practices, they set a time that for the next X amount of minutes they do this drill. Then for the next X minutes they do this scrimmage. For the next X minute they work on punt returns. And so they only have a limited amount of time in practice to work on these things. So when they were doing kick coverage and punt coverage, what they did was they had one team in there, and then when they went down and had the play, the whole group hustled off. The new group came on, so they were like ready to go. There was no running back from however far down the field back to the starting spot. They ran off the field right there. The other team came on right there, so they could cycle them in and out fast. And Joe DeCamillis really had those guys going team. So they were really working hard on the practice. They had different kick returners. They had different punt and kick coverage teams, block teams. They were, the only lock as far as the specialties is Robbie Gould is a lock. They're still working out the two long snappers and the two punters. And it's starting to become more clear that Tressway is not going to win that battle because they didn't waste a draft pick on him like they did O'Donnell. He's not as big and fast and strong as O'Donnell is to go down there and make tackles if need be. And O'Donnell is a fan favorite that's just kicking the crap out of the ball in practice. When he goes out there, you can hear chants of mega kick. A mega punt. So they're really chanting this guy's name. It's kind of incredible. So back to the bad. Roberto Garza had a little bit of a rough game. I'm hoping that's just veteran being old, and he's going to get back into the swing of things. Green had a bad game. He had a face mask after a really nice stop on Darren Sproles. So that was bad to see, and he whiffed on a couple of other tackles. Not something you want to see, especially from a guy who had a rough season last year. You don't want to see that. You need to see him step up and really start to play better. It's not a good way to start this season. And he may have been better in practice. I can't tell for certain. I've only seen 2 of the practices, but Kasim Green just definitely needs to pick up the pace and really progress his game, or else he's going to not make the roster. John Bostic was another guy who, the Bears were counting on last year and didn't have that great of a season. And he came in and, he missed several tackles. He was just, he was very fast and got there, but he just missed some tackles. He looked a little raw out there again, just like he did last year. Jordan Palmer looked bad. And as I said last show, I thought he looked really great in the practice that I saw. And from what I'd read, Jimmy Clausen had really climbed ahead of him and was really cementing his spot as the number 2 quarterback. And I was like, I can't see it. Jordan Palmer he knows the playbook better. He's a smart guy. He seems like he's built for this system where he's got a coach's mentality. He coaches quarterbacks coming into the draft. He's seen the system for a year, which is last year. I just felt he was going to be the guy. And then after seeing that one practice, Jordan Palmer looked so much better than Jimmy Clausen. I was like, oh, I don't know what these people are talking about. They're crazy. But then after seeing the game, Jordan Palmer did not look good. He had really poor pocket presence. He didn't, when pressure was coming, he looked like a deer in the headlights. Had no sense to either roll out of the pocket or step up into the pocket or whatever he was going to do. He just stood there and froze and got hit. He had the play where he almost fumbled it, but they called it that his arm was moving forward. That was not good. He was really off on his throws, poor decisions. He had the interception. Just not a good game by Jordan Palmer, and which is sad to say because I really like him and I thought he looked good in the two practices I saw. Just not in the game. You can really tell that Jimmy Clausen has more NFL experience just by the way he ran the team. And then I have to make an apology. I was wrong on another thing. So if you read on the SwerskiSports.com site, I took to the woodshed on Cody Booth and Joe Long. I'm going to apologize to Cody Booth. You got cut before the game. And I was looking at a roster that was from 2 days before the game. So my roster was only 2 days old, and it was already out of being updated. So it was actually, I was saying Cody Booth, but he was already gone by that time. So it was actually Dennis Rowland, who's a new tackle that they signed, 6 years out of Georgia, 6'9", 15 pounds. He looked atrocious. Only block that he sustained that whole game was one on a screen pass when he should have let his guy go, but he held that one. But all the other ones, he couldn't hold up. He got beat. Some olays where he let his guy go past. He just looked atrocious out there. Joe Long, all I have to say is, oof, he looked bad. Holding calls and missing blocks and when these guys were in, I kept having, the plays were getting blown up in the backfield. So I was going back and watching everything in slow motion and rewinding it in slow motion, and every time it was these two guys that were just getting beat like rented stepchildren. It was terrible. McClellan didn't look good. He looked fast and he looked like he was getting to the plays, but he'd get down there and he'd miss the tackle. You can't keep missing the tackle. Sometimes they're hard tackles, but that's what you're getting paid to do, and that's what you're supposed to be doing. And then in coverage, he was getting beat a little bit. So it wasn't a good game for McClellan, but even though he's looked good in practices. And then another bad was De La Puente's knee. Michael Spurlock, he had a drop, the fumble when he was in there as wide receiver. And that's the thing about the Bears this year is last year they had the luxury of having a guy that was specialized in kick returns in Devin Hester. And that's all he did. He focused on kick returns and punt returns. This year, they're going to need somebody to play multiple roles, especially with Marquise Wilson being injured. And he's going to be out for the first several games of the season with his broken collarbone. So they need somebody to really step up and take that number 3 wide receiver position. And, they need that kick and punt returner to be somebody that's going to really step up. Seemed like they had been high on Michael Spurlock, but, he had the drop. And when he was out as wide receiver, he really wasn't attacking the ball. He was being really passive out there and allowing the defensive backs to jump the play and make a pass breakup and such. And he really needs to attack the ball and make sure that he's the one going and getting it and being the aggressor as far as getting it, like Brandon Marshall does. But he didn't do that. And that's really going to hurt him in his chances to make this team. Especially since they saw what Marquise Wilson was doing before he got injured. So these wide receivers really need to step up because, after the big 3 was going to be Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, and Marquise Wilson. And Marquise Wilson did a great job in the offseason of preparing himself. Looked stronger, looked faster, ran his routes so much better. His routes were so crisp. He looked like the real deal, ready to step up. So I was so excited to see Marquise Wilson, and then that calling them the big 3 as far as wide receivers. But now these hurt. You need somebody to step up. Josh Bellamy, Eric Weems, Michael Spurlock, Josh Morgan, Terrence Tolliver, Chris Williams, Greg Hurd. Somebody's got to step up. And Chris Williams is another guy that is getting a shot coming from Canada. He's not that big, but he's got some good speed on him, and you saw that in the big touchdown pass that he caught against the Eagles. But then he went and hurt his hamstring. So now you're back to square one again. Who's going to be the guy that steps up? And I'm wondering if it's not going to be anybody that steps up, and they're going to have a guy like Zach Miller step up and run a lot of 2 tight end sets until Marquise Wilson comes back. And one thing to note is at today's practice, Marquise Wilson was there, and he was in his jersey without the pads, and he was wearing a Bears fisherman hat with his arm in the sling, and he was going and catching one-handed balls. So it was good to see that. He's still out there doing okay. So many best wishes to him and some speedy returns to get back to this team. Some other notes today is I'd always wondered why it seemed that Michael Ford was so far down the list for the Bears, because he looked as good as anybody in the game, besides Forte. So I didn't understand why he seemed to be in the doghouse. Was he missing blocks in practice? What was he doing? And I think I spotted it today. And granted, I haven't been to a lot of the practices, and I didn't have a good vantage point. And I realized how hard it is when you go to training camp to be able to spot a lot of things, because when you go to the Bears training camp facility in Bourbonnais at Olivet Nazarene University, you have 4 fields. So there's basically take 3 football fields and put them side by side by side, and then on the other end put one long ways, so you make like an L shape. That's the practice field, and they use all those fields, and they move them around so quickly you can't, and there's so many people there that you can't quite just move around and be able to see what you want. So it's a little bit difficult. So I got to see what I could see. But when I did see the running back position, what I saw was he dropped several passes in the running drill. So I could see where that coaching staff is just furious about that, because the running game is one thing, but then you also need your running backs to be able to receive as well. And he was dropping several passes, and that's got to just really put you in the doghouse in Mark Trestman's book, I'm imagining. So I can see why, because I keep hearing that Sean Drawn is going to be is in position to be the backup running back. And I don't see anything special about the guy, but it just seems like he's just very consistent. He's been in the league before, so you don't feel uncomfortable about him being able to make the blocks during pass protection. And he's been very steady as far as catching the ball and doing his responsibilities. And I think they're very excited about that. You don't have anything like with Kadeem Carey. He's a rookie. You don't know what you're going to get when he steps in the NFL field. You can see what you see in practice and in the first game so far, but you really have to worry about, is he going to pick up a blitz properly so Cutler doesn't get demolished and end up ultimately hurt. So you really have to be wondering about that. And that's a big reason that he's not going to be the primary backup, I don't think. But Michael Ford's been, he played last year, so he's had a year under his belt. He also has return experience, so that's why I was really expecting him to do more. But, the running backs, you've got Kadeem Carey, Michael Ford, Sonoris Perry, and Jordan Lynch and Sean Drawn. And Jordan Lynch looked really comfortable out there. He looked strong. He looked fast. After the doghouse that Michael Ford is in, I wouldn't be shocked if they don't keep a fullback on Tony Fiammetta. If they don't keep him, I wouldn't be surprised. And if they kept Jordan Lynch, I wouldn't be that surprised. He looked pretty nice. Maybe they put him on the practice squad, but he looked nice out there. He looked comfortable. He hit the holes hard. He did everything they asked. Not a bad job. So those are some of the things that I noticed. Some more things that we have to keep an eye on is some of the backup rookie defensive tackles in Sutton and Ferguson. They had some moments, and they had some moments where they looked terrible as well. So we got to see how they fit in this rotation. But Paya looks good, and Ratliff looked good. So we'll see how they start to progress as it goes on. Your defensive tackles, Lee Pagese, I don't see him making the roster. Brandon Dunn, don't see him making the roster. Nate Collins looked really good. He's really pushing for a spot. So I'm thinking that it's going to be Jay Ratliff, Stephen Paya, Will Sutton, Ego Ferguson, and Nate Collins, and that's going to be your guys. And those rookies better keep playing hard, because Nate Collins, before everybody got injured and decimated last season, was playing the best out of any defensive tackle for the Bears. And that includes Henry Melton when he was healthy. So, hopefully we can get Nate Collins in there playing well, and Jay Ratliff in there playing well, and then that defensive end rotation. We need to get Jared Allen back to being healthy. So there's a lot of things looking good for the Bears. Some of the things that we're going to have to watch for going into this next upcoming game against Jacksonville is I want to see how the tight end rotation looks with Martellus Bennett not suspended and in the game. Or is he gonna be too dominant and not allow everyone else to have time and be able to shine? I want to see that. I want to see if Jamie Clausen can have another good game. I want to see if the run blocking can progress a little bit. I want to see the pass blocking from Kadeem Carey. I want to see what we have there, because if he ends up being able to block, Michael Ford might be really in trouble. And I want to see that number 3 wide receiver. I want to see somebody step up. So those are the things I'm really watching for going into this next game. And one more thing I want to say about the Bears is I had a listener send me an email, and he asked me, does Brandon Marshall make the Hall of Fame? And I stopped and thought about it. I was like, that's kind of a good question. So I looked at his stats overall, and Brandon Marshall has some really good, stats. So I stopped to think, all right, well, who is a wide receiver that's in the Hall of Fame that was probably borderline Hall of Fame? And I went with Andre Reed. Andre Reed had a really nice career, and I think it was the reason he went to 4 straight Super Bowls, and his longevity of his career. He played 16 seasons. I think that kind of propelled him into the Hall of Fame level. And so I looked at his stats. He played 16 years. He had 13,198 yards, averaged 13.9 receptions, or yards per reception, had 87 touchdowns. Then we look at Brandon Marshall. He's got 57 touchdowns, 12.7 yards per reception, has played 8 years, and has 9,050 yards, 9,050. So at this point, no, he's not a Hall of Famer. Does he have the talent level of a Hall of Famer? He's better than Andre Reed. Sorry to say Andre Reed, but Brandon Marshall is better than you. But he had those lost years in Miami. Even though he had 1,000 yards, it just, he didn't have any touchdowns. If he can play 6 more seasons, so he's at 14 seasons, I look for him to probably put up in those 4 seasons another like 5,000 yards. That'll put him at 14,000 yards and probably 40 more touchdowns. That puts him at 97. He is then borderline, but I just think he got hurt a little bit by those years in Miami of just not having any touchdowns and being out of the limelight. So he's really borderline to me. I could see if he has the next 6 years he plays really well, making it, but it's going to be tough for him to make it. But I did look at him compared to how he would fare as far as the rest of the Bears wide receivers of all time. And the all-time leader of receptions for the Bears is Johnny Morris with 5,059 yards, followed by Harlan Hill, followed by Walter Payton. Walter Payton is 3rd on the all-time Bears receiving list. Right now, Brandon Marshall is 19th. Brandon Marshall has only played for the Bears for 2 seasons, and he's already 19th on the list of all-time reception yards. Not even joking you. in the next 2 years, he's going to be the number one receiver in the history of Bears. And that's just really, that's partly he's really good, and partly that's really sad on the Bears' part that you haven't had a passing attack in so long. And I'm going to read you the list in order of Bears' number one receiving yards down to 10. Number 1, Johnny Morris. 2, Harlan Hill. 3, Walter Payton. 4, Mike Ditka. 5, Curtis Conway. Marty Booker, Willie Gault, Ken Kavanaugh, Dick Gordon, and James Scott. I don't remember James Scott, Dick Gordon, Ken Kavanaugh. I don't remember those guys at all. Brandon Marshall, probably not a Hall of Famer, but definitely the Bears' best wide receiver ever, easily. I guess we move on to the Cubs. That's really all I plan to talk about this week. Is we have Javi Baez mania. Javi Baez comes up, and in his first game, I watched the whole game until the 12th, and it was almost midnight, and I had to be at work by, I don't remember, early. So I was like, I need to go to bed. We're almost midnight. By the time I let my dogs outside to go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, climb into bed, I just checked the score to see if it was ended, and I had already missed a Javi Baez home run, number 1. So the guy's got power. I saw him hit a couple of shots to the opposite field that went right to the wall, that, on any slight breeze, and that's a home run. He's got stupid amounts of power. He just can clobber the ball. He can hit it to any field, but he strikes out so much. He is just up there swinging at everything. And I don't know if he's just trying to hit home runs because he knows this team's not going anywhere, or what, but he is just striking out way too much. And I keep hearing that Jed and Theo aren't going to touch his swing. They're going to let him go. And I don't know if that's the right move or not, because he's looking a little bit silly up there sometimes, like those high fastballs and the outside pitches, and he's falling down sometimes. He's swinging so hard. The kid's got tremendous bat speed, but he's just swinging so hard that he's almost knocking himself over. It's, I feel like they need to sort of step in and get him to take it easy a little bit and take a pitch or two, because if you take some pitches, you're going to get better pitches to hit, and the kid can hit. It's not even a question mark. So you're starting to see that the future is closer than you think for the Cubs. They already brought up Alcantara. They brought up Baez. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring up Jorge Soler in September. And then, and the waiver wire, they put a claim on Cole Hamels. And so Ruben Amaro is the general manager for the Phillies. And I lived in Philadelphia for a number of years, so I still maintain some friendships with people from Philadelphia that are avid Phillies fans. They hate Ruben Amaro. They can't stand him. And when this trade deadline, he didn't do anything. He just stood pat. And they kept these astronomical veteran contracts of guys that aren't doing anything and didn't replenish their empty farm system. The fans just lost their minds. So I think it was really smart for the Cubs to put a claim in on Cole Hamels, because you have a general manager who's getting beat up by the media and by the fans for not making a move. And you've got a farm system full of guys, and Cole Hamels is a good pitcher. So I think what they were trying to do is, show the fans that they're trying to win now. They're not going to be sellers anymore. And they wanted to see if they could fleece Ruben Amaro. If they could give up some low-level talent and then get a guy like Cole Hamels, of course they're going to do it. They're going to do it in a heartbeat. It was a situation where I felt like they were sending a message to the fans, and then they were trying to see if they could fleece Ruben Amaro. And ultimately they did, and Ruben Amaro stood pat, pulled Cole Hamels off of the waiver wire and back onto the roster. But the Cubs did make a play and got Jacob Turner from the Marlins. Jacob Turner, if you guys remember, he was one of the top prospects, and he was the centerpiece of the package that the Marlins got from the Tigers in exchange for Anibal Sanchez in 2012. but he really struggled when he played for Miami this season with almost 6 ERA and 20 appearances, and he was out of options. So the Miami Marlins cut ties with him and put him on the waiver wire. The Cubs are like, well, this is a guy who was really highly thought of in the draft, drafted very high, even very high in the Tigers minor league system, that he's a guy that could be a change of scenario type situation, maybe change of scenario and a new pitching philosophy with like Bozio in the Cubs, that they could do something like they did with Jake Arrieta. So the Cubs claimed him, and just like they did with Jake Arrieta, they can put him with their reclamation products of struggling pitchers, including Jake Arrieta and Felix Dobrandt over the last 2 years. Turner is only 23 years old. He's under team control through the 2018 season, and he's got a lot of upside. He was a really low acquisition cost. The Cubs gave up 2 guys to get him, and I'm not particularly upset. Is that they gave up Bremer, who was a 27th round draft pick from 2012, and he was playing for they'd been splitting time between Single A King County and Single A Daytona, and then Arias, who had spent the majority of the season in Daytona and looked okay. Neither was ranked in the top 30 prospects, so it was bottom of the roster type guys, and they got a guy who could very well be doing something good for the Cubs. I mean, Jacob Turner is somebody that had a lot of good stuff coming into the draft, so they look like somebody that they could fix because he's still young. He's still so young. So I really see that a lot of these things are a low cost, high reward type moves, and sending messages to the fans and the media that this is it. The rebuilding is at the point where they're going to start building the major league roster. And I really, really look towards the Cubs and them being able to spend a lot of money to try to get one of the big name starting pitchers, either Scherzer or Lester or somebody like that. Because if they're able to do that, they've got a lot of position players in the farm system and coming into the majors already. And then if you're able to say add a John Lester, you've got Lester as your number 1, Arrieta as your number 2, Kyle Hendricks number 3, Travis Wood 4, and then you've got a bunch of guys that are viable number 5 options, possibly the guy they brought over from the Oakland A's, or they could bring up a CJ Edwards maybe, or they've got a lot of options and then for that 5th spot. But if you have Arrieta, Hendricks, Travis Wood, and then your number 1 starter, you suddenly make your rotation that much better, and you're not going to be trading at the deadline, getting rid of 40% of your starting rotation like you have in previous years. So I'm excited. I'm getting really excited for the Cubs. Before it was, well, what can the kids do? What can the kids do? But now I'm starting to say, the kids are here. What are the Cubs going to do to bolster the rest of the roster? And I really look at them to keep checking the waiver wire and be aggressive in the off season, because I think next year is going to be the year that they really take a step forward. And that's about it for this episode. A little bit of a short one. Apologize for that. Next week we'll have hopefully Gary back and have some other guests on the show. We're going to be doing more Bears stuff because we're getting into Bears season. Hopefully we'll be having Chris from Third Man In coming in and maybe talk a little Blackhawks. We haven't talked about them in a couple weeks just because it's the slowest part of the season. That'll be about it for this episode of Bill Swerski's Sports Talk Chicago. Make sure to check us out at swerskisports.com. That's SWERSKI sports.com. If you're on Twitter, you can check us out at Swerski Sports. Facebook, facebook.com/Swerski Sports. You can also, we have the email up on the website, or if you ever want to call and leave a message that we can play on the air, or if you just want to rant and rave and say what sucks about the show or what's great about the show, we've set up a voice line that you can call. It's phone number 847-261-4146. That's 847-261-4146. So if you want your voice on the air, you can go ahead and call that number, and we can, you leave a message, and we can play it in the next episode, what you thought about the Bears, what you thought about this, that, or the other. And you can do that all week, and if we get it before we record the next episode, we'll throw it right on there. So if the Bears play on Thursday night and you want to leave a message after the game, good, bad, or ugly, we can go ahead and play that in the next episode, as long as it's clean and has something interesting to say. Also, make sure you check out our sponsor, Rockford Ice Hogs. You can check them out at icehogs.com, because the season is coming up quick. Make sure you get your tickets. So thanks again. This is Sean from Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago, signing off, and bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van. And she looks like...
Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears!
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down